City Council meeting. I want to apologize to those who've been waiting on Zoom. Those here in the building, we had an accidental discharge of a mace can that made this room unusable for quite a while. And we couldn't move the meeting because we have all of our electronics, the radio, Zoom, and everything else. And it would take longer to move than it would be to just wait and air it out. I want to thank the fire department for helping come to the literally come to the rescue and help us air out the room. So having said that, we already are 37 minutes into it. So I don't know, we might have an abbreviated meeting, we might not, but we'll see how that goes. But we'll have, if anybody needs water, any kind of help like that, please let us know. Again, our apologies for the inconvenience. All right, let me call the meeting to order and we'll start with the prayer and the pledge. All rise. With the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory forever. Let's live to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Ramsey, call the meeting or call the roll.
Davis. St. Columbia.
Present.
Crockett. Franklin.
Here.
Etherly.
Here.
Ford. Here. 6 present.
So we have a quorum. I want to start off also welcoming the KJIW and Helena-West Helena Daily or Helena-West Helena World and any other media we might have, people on Zoom. I want to recognize Officer Tyler as our Sergeant of Arms tonight. We're going back to in-person meetings. We're going to go back to using a Sergeant of Arms. We thank you for your attendance. Then also, I want to bring your attention to something that Ms. Helen Halbert has worked hard on, and that is to get us new chairs. We had some really embarrassingly bad chairs for the press conference that we had recently with a lot of folks from out of town. And as y'all know, it's been an issue for a long time. So, and we also got the seal that we had at one time deteriorated, and that's been replaced. So our city council room is looking pretty good. I want to recognize Ms. Halbert for her hard work on that. Having said that, I think so. We're going to start with the executive session. That's what everybody has been talking about, and we thought we would make that the top of the agenda. I hope we can get at least through the fire department's presentation tonight. I'm willing to forego some of the items at the end if we can do that. And then Mr. Valley also has something on public attendance, which I think is important. So maybe we can get that far. Depends on how far we do get on the executive session. An executive session was requested by Councilman Franklin on a personnel issue. And we have received a lot of interest about this. And I want to note, I'm going to recognize our city attorney, Mr. Valley, here in a second. But I do want to notate, as I promised I would, the objections by KJIW and the Helena-West Helena Daily World regarding an executive session for this particular reason. I think Mr. Valley has more to say about that. I know that if the city employees are request or say that they don't need an executive session, that might be an option. But I too have reservations about it because while Chief Mayfield and I are in the room, because of the nature of the investigations, we've both been advised that we can't discuss the details either in private or in public. So any vote that might occur has to be reported in public anyway. So the only thing that would be in private would be the questions or discussion that would occur. But that is important, and I can't control what anybody says. But I can tell you that, and I'll let Chief Mayfield answer for himself if he wants, but both of us have been advised that because of criminal investigations and the possibility of litigation, not to comment on the specifics of the case. Having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Valley.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andre Valley, the city attorney for the city of Helena-West Helena. We're here today in a very a posture relating to an employee matter. More specifically, there's been a request by council member Christopher Franklin for an executive session. The council has taken its own sua sponte, which means they're taking it on their own initiative relating to.
If I may interpose a procedural issue. There's been no request made yet to go into executive session. Is this discussion not yet ripe until a request is made?
Well, Mr. Franklin's asked for the
On the agenda, but he hasn't made a motion to go into executive session. I mean, I'm just saying, until he makes the request, then we're having a discussion about something that hasn't happened.
Valley.
So much after what you're saying, your druthers are that a motion is second, and there'll be a vote before we have a discussion on it.
This sounds like a part of the discussion about executive session, but we're having a discussion about something that hasn't even been put on the floor yet. I mean, it may seem like nitpicking, but it's procedurally, it's not before us yet.
I note your objection, Mr. Anthony. I'll go ahead and do the discussion, and you all can further discuss it later. Because I think once you if you decide to go to executive session, we can address that at that point. But Mr. Franklin has requested executive session. There has been no motion as noted by Mr. Etherly. There has been no second. What we have is a posture of two former employees who were terminated by a letter by Mayor Kevin Smith regarding to some conduct. And relating to that conduct, there was a termination for both of the employees. The letter that he has, the only information that those employees have is that letter. They have no additional information relating to the mayor admission that he has been advised about a criminal investigation. I have not advised him that. I have not discussed with him a criminal investigation. I have not discussed the chief of police with criminal investigation. What I had as city attorney, an executive session can be called for limited purpose: for hiring, firing, promotion, demotion. The city council has taken on themselves to look at the issue of the two individuals who were fired and possibly reinstating, so they could file within the hiring and firing portion of the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act, also known as the Freedom of Information Act, provides that under limited circumstances, the press can have access to information. There's been freedom of information requests by the Helena World for the personnel files of both of the individuals who were terminated. And those individuals have objected, and we're awaiting Attorney General's opinion, is my understanding, from the employees relating to that right. Tonight, we have a balanced and a counterbalance. The press seeks information under the freedom of the press. The employees have a constitutional right to privacy. And so the constitutional right to privacy is rooted in these proceedings, in the sense of they have a right to privacy about the information that may be released about them. Now, as it relates to that, the newspaper and the radio station, KGIW and the Daily World, have both lodged objections. They've also notified the attorney for the Arkansas Press Association, who agrees with the objection. The Municipal League has called me today about the objection, and their objections are rooted in the fact that they feel that this is not promotion, demotion, hiring, and firing, that this is a overturning of the mayor's action, which would fall outside of that. And talking to John Wilkinson today, he opines and agrees with me that this would fall fairly within the scope of hiring, firing, promotion, and demotion. Now, the employee can waive it if they so choose, but it has to be a knowing and intelligent waiver of that because this is a constitutional right. They would have to see every document that would be presented before them and know that before they openly chose to waive their privacy rights before it. And so the only issue that they have is a letter from the mayor, and the letter is very limited and said your services are no longer needed, is my understanding. Also, as relates to this, the newspaper has raised objections regarding potential conflicts of interest related to three of the people seated here. The newspaper, the Daily World, has raised a potential conflict of interest on behalf of Mr. Etherly, not on behalf, as opposed to Mr. Etherly, Mr. Franklin, and Ms. Wanda Crockett. Mr. Etherly, there's been an allegation that you represent one of the officers, Ms. Juanita Mills, and Mr. Franklin. It's my understanding that the child that is the subject of part of this investigation is related to you in the form of your niece. Ms. Crockett, you work at the Department of Human Services.
Oh, not DCFS.
I understand. Allow me to finish. Those are the things that the paper is saying. That relates to governmental ethics, and that relates to whether you can do it. I cannot tell you whether you to recuse. Those are issues that I have to bring up to you because those allegations were made, and the newspaper is alleging the appearance of impropriety on behalf of the three of you related to it. Now, going forward, the issue is that would have to be the policy. So I'm going to question, how did we get here? The city council repealed section 6.14 of the employee handbook, who provided for a full hearing, calling in witnesses and et cetera. You all repealed that issue. However, section 3.2 of the handbook still says that the mayor hires and fires department heads in accordance with Arkansas Code annotated section 1442.110. It's subject to the right of city council to overrule it by 2/3 vote. And then it further says that the department heads hire non-department heads employees with the consent of the mayor, and that's subject to overturn by the city council. The posture that we have is that the city council, if you're going to do it, have to act quickly in this narrow sense. Because these are administrative actions, what happens is the longer you delay, you'll be getting into day-to-day operations relating to the mayor. So the council does have authority in a limited circumstance, a limited time frame, to potentially overrule the actions of the mayor. And that's why the need for expediency exists. It's not that there's a rush to judgment. It's because the longer that you wait in time frame, the mayor has the right to go ahead and hire other people, advertise position, promote other people, and all those things. So the city council would have to act in a swift manner in order to deal with those things. Now, the next issue relating to the executive session is this. As opposed to 6.14, which was appealed, section 3.12, what this is executive session. Executive session does not provide for the calling of witnesses. The only people that can be present in the executive session is the city council, the mayor, the department head, and the supervisor of the employees and employees. No attorneys can go in. Now, the papers raised the objection to Mr. Etherly as an attorney going in, but Mr. Etherly is a city council member. Now, the issue of whether he represents Ms. Wanda Mills on this matter or some other matter is something Mr. Etherly has to state. Furthermore, as it relates to all of you, if there's anyone who has a pecuniary interest in the outcome of this, then you would also have a conflict of interest as relates to it. Let us start with the employment and will also. The employees, the city of council has a policy. The city of Helena-West on the policy of employee at will. That means an employee can be fired for any reason, good reason, bad reason, any reason at all. And the mayor's letter does not give a reason. However, that is one of the provisions of the employee will that you can do so. However, there's a counterbalance to the employee will if it violates public policy. Public policy would be some of the issues that are constitutional issues, such as race, age, gender, national origin, sexual orientation, freedom of speech, freedom of association, those type of things. If there's those things, then that nullifies the employee will, and it's a violation of constitutional law. Also, the mayor has to follow city policy in doing so, and that would be under Arkansas law, wrongful termination if he's not following policy. As you all go through this, if you choose to go in executive session, the mayor has made action, and you all are acting in an administrative role in this way. An administrative role, what that would mean is that you're acting and you're substituting your decision, your judgment, your interpretation for the mayor's. In doing so, you all may lose your legislative immunity and be able to be sued in your individual right. Otherwise, you're acting as a city council member, but when you're doing this, you in essence will be making a hiring or firing decision, which means that you may lose legislative immunity. Now, all things are available to the city council. If you choose to go into executive session to do this, all things would include anything from doing no action and saying, fine, they will remain fired. Second option would be overturn the mayor. Anything that's available, whether it's probation, suspension, suspension with pay, suspension without pay, requiring additional training, whatever you're doing, what you're doing is you'll be substituting your judgment for the mayor's judgment. You're acting in an administrative role at this point because you're making the determination of what is the policy of the city, what is in the best interest under the circumstances for the city and the employees. Are the employees treated fairly? Have they been given a due process? Has the mayor followed the rules of the city? You're acting in all those things. All the things that come into consideration in addressing this matter and going forward. Now, the employees are here. I have spoken with the attorney. They're represented by Attorney Russell Wood. Attorney Russell Wood has been here since before the meeting started. At some point, he may want to make a statement to the council. Now, again, this is not a hearing where you're calling witnesses. Neither I nor Mr. Wood can go into an executive section. Mr. Wood would like to just briefly speak to the council whenever he gets a chance, just to say what his client's position are and settle before you go into executive session. Now, the issue is the employee can waive the hearing, but one of the things, my concern about employee waiving the privacy of a hearing is that any document that is shown will be subject to the FOI, and the press will be entitled to any document that you all discuss openly in this meeting. And so that's one of the concerns I have. They still have a right to privacy. The disadvantage that they feel that they would have is they only have one sheet of paper at this point. They have not been given anything, and they have not been told specifically of an investigation that the mayor mentioned earlier, where he's been advised by someone not to make any discussions. Now, the release of the information, how did we get here? Freedom of Information Act request was made of me, of the city, and was given to me from the Daily World. The Freedom of Information Act request was based on the fact that there was a termination of 2 employees. The open meetings law provides specifically when we're looking at the last administrative action, there's no other action beyond last administrative action beyond firing. The 2 employees were fired. And so at that point, the Freedom of Information Act kicked in, and the right of privacy, which has to be balanced against the compelling public interest. So when the information was given to me, Mr. Bagler from the Helena-West, the videotape was released. I've had conversations with Todd Murray since then. I had conversations with the Arkansas Municipal League. The Arkansas Municipal League agreed with me in the release of it because at that point, there was no criminal investigation in the sense of that was released. Now, I am not saying that there's a criminal investigation. That is not what I'm saying as city attorney, and I don't want it to be construed that I've said that. The mayor's advised that he has had communication with someone other than me relating to that. In addition, I want the public to know I was not advised of any of this relating to before it happened. I would not speak to the chief, the lieutenant, nor the mayor regarding all this. And so what is happening at this point as city attorney, the egg has been broken, and the yolk is out, and everyone asking me about the yolk of the egg. And we're trying to put the yolk back in the egg. And people asking me whether it's the white of the egg, the yellow of the egg, whether the crack of the egg, whether it's been scrambled, whether it's been poached, and all those things. And what I'm just trying to do is answer what I've been given. What I've been given is a broken egg. And that is where we are at this point. So if the city council desires to go in executive session, the city council has that right. Again, the city attorney can't be there. No one else could be there other than the employees, the city council, the mayor, the department head, which would be the chief of police, as well as the direct supervisor for those two employees. At this point, I would entertain any questions that you all would have. I believe I covered most of it. I may have forgot some. I know I was talking for a while.
If we need any advisement on any issue, can you be summoned for a response?
If the city attorney had to be questioned, the meeting would have to be opened back up. And I would have to come in and with the entire public answer any question you have, because I cannot be in executive session. Now, for that to go in executive session, you guys must state a particular purpose you're going to executive session for. And basically on these circumstances, it would be considering the termination and the rehiring of those two individual employees. But you'd have to make a motion to do so, and a second and a vote, and then everyone be excluded except for those parties. Mr. Wood wanted to, if he ever got to that point, he wanted to say something to the council before we go ahead. Again, this is not a hearing where you can ask questions, call witnesses, or any of those things. But in fairness, if he's speaking on behalf of the client, he can make a statement if he so chooses. Anyone else have any questions? Or, I know we hadn't had a motion in a second, but I was just trying to see if anyone had any questions about the process. Both of them. Mr. Woods, my understanding, you represent both of them?
That's right.
Yes. It's just their turn. You got it. The question I've been asked is, the mayor is asking me whether Mr. Wood should be allowed to address the council on behalf of his clients. His clients, I think he just wants to make an open statement about it before they go into council. He can't go in. They can go in without him. The mayor can address whatever his concerns, and everyone can address whatever concern, but I think he just wanted to make something. Is that correct, Mr. Wood?
Yes, yeah, I'm sure a general statement to council, advise that.
Hold on just a second.
You're not recognized, Mr. Woods. I'm sorry.
I was just asking a question at this point.
I know.
Yeah.
Last question.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I don't think he was. The mayor was asking just procedurally whether you should be allowed to speak. That's what I was addressing with him. But because I'm talking and no one else is privy to it, I was trying to make everybody privy to understand what we and the mayor were talking about. Any other questions? I guess during the discussion portion, it would be up to the council as to whether you all would want Mr. Wood to say anything to you. If there's no other question, I don't know if you all want to go into next session or
If I could, Mr. Valley, to Mr. Etherly's point, I guess really the next logical step, since it is on the agenda at Mr. Franklin's request, is for Mr. Franklin to be recognized officially about his request. Is that pretty much your point, Mr. Etherly?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
about 10
So,
minutes ago.
I mean, if it's okay with you, Mr. Valley,
That's right.
we'll recognize Mr.
To discuss the
Right.
issue between Ms. Mills and Mr. Gibbons.
Mr. Franklin makes a motion that we go into executive session to discuss the dismissal of Ms. Mills and Mr. Gibbons. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Crockett seconds the motion. Any questions or comments about the motion? And I'm going to ask a question, Mr. Valley.
I think the motion need to be, okay,
We
yeah.
have a member of the,
Your motion is to do what? I want to make
we
sure.
can discuss it after the motion is seconded.
Go into
We have
executive
discussion,
session,
questions,
discuss
comments.
Mr. Gibbons and Mrs. Mills.
And we have somebody represent the media that wants to speak, and I'm going to let Mr. Valley advise us on that. I don't know how that,
So, so we don't have to vote on this before we go into this?
You do. You do. We were just having a point of clarity. I was making sure what his motion was. His motion was to go in executive session, discuss the termination and possible rehiring of Ms. Mills and Mr. Givens. That was seconded by, I think, Ms. Crockett. At this point, the question would be, are you all open to discussion before we go in? Because Mr. Wood wants to be recognized and Mr. Bagley wants to be recognized.
I would,
Mr. Booth?
I would argue that since we have not followed our own procedure in terms of people who would like to speak being on the agenda ahead of time, considering the fact that we knew this was on the agenda ahead of time, and other people didn't know that they could have been allowed to speak, I'm going to object to allowing anybody to speak. We have, I think Mr. Valley has, and I have, objections that have been registered by the Helena Helena-West Helena World and KJIW. I'd issue my own objection to anyone being placed on the agenda at this late date because, in my opinion, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And if we start to have legal counsel make arguments on behalf of clients, it starts to very much resemble a hearing. It also was not given the same treatment to everybody. In other words, we didn't let everybody know they could have plenty of time and all of that. So it seems to me only fair to just not recognize anybody from the audience who wasn't already on the agenda. That's my opinion, but that's what I would add to it. And also, before going into the executive session, there's been a question about conflicts of interest. And so I'm going to ask if anybody chooses to recuse, this would be the time to do that, I would think. Is that right? That's all I have to say.
I didn't hear your last statement.
If anybody were to recuse, there's been a question raised about conflicts of interest on this matter. Before there's a vote on whether to go in executive session, if there is a conflict of interest that exists and someone wants to recuse publicly, this would be the time to do it. I asked Mr. Valley if that's true, and he said yes. So
Yes.
those are my comments.
In addition, I did not specifically ask for the objections to be made part of the minutes. The press asked that we specifically attach the objections to the minutes. And so on behalf of KJIW, I don't represent KJIW, nor do I represent the Helena World, but I did tell both of them that we would note the objection and attach that specific objection, the written objections to the minutes. So Madam Clerk, I asked that their objections be made a part of tonight's minutes.
No objection, we'll have those objections to the minutes. Any other questions, comments about the motion?
Yes, I move that we allow, what's the name? Mr. Woods to make his statement. It's not an open, excuse me, we have to have this discussion before, because if we vote to go in executive session,
Not tonight.
nothing else can be done but us going into executive session. So we have to have this discussion prior.
At this point, you have a motion and second on the floor. If you all want to rescind the motion second, then do your motion. Then I think
I
that'd be
rescind my motion.
Second.
So you rescind your motion, you rescind your second.
Yeah, because I agree with Ms. Crockett. If that's the case, I think you said Mr. Bagley wanted to say something as well. Give him the same opportunity as you give the Lord.
Well, you had other lawyers, other people
We just made. the
who
motion.
weren't given the same opportunities. My objection to,
But they're not
but
here.
before we do that, you've officially rescinded your
Yes, I-
motion and your second, Ms. Crockett. So the motion is off the table. So now the council is asking, and I'm sorry.
I'm motioning that we allow Mr. Woods to speak.
So Ms. Crockett makes a motion to allow Mr. Woods, is it?
Anybody?
Yes, his name is
Mr.
Russell Wood.
Mr. Russell Wood to approach the city council and make comments about whether or about the issue of an executive session. Is there a second
Ain't gonna make no comment about it.
or whatever? But I will again note my objection. It sounds like a hearing. You're allowing counsel to speak. And we're trying desperately, deliberately not to appear to be a hearing.
That's just you saying.
And that's right. But that's my opinion. I want to register it just like anybody else would who's an elected official on this issue. I think it's inappropriate not to make that available to everybody. And that is a hearing. And we decided not to do hearings. That's my opinion. But was there a second to that motion? You seconded the motion. Mr. Franklin seconds the motion. Any other conversation and questions, comments about the motion to allow Mr. Wood to approach the council? If not, call the- I'm sorry, Mr. Edelman.
There was some discussion between Mr. Franklin and Ms. Crockett about who was going to speak, and I want to be sure.
Because somebody said Mr. Bagley or somebody?
Well,
Only somebody I know was asked.
do you want to broaden your motion to include other people?
No one else has been brought to our attention that wanted to speak. I have not heard anybody else say anything. Nobody said anything about anybody else speaking.
I think
So you want to limit the motion to
No, I'm
Mr.
not. If
Wood?
somebody got somebody else.
Can you restate your motion, Mr. Crockett?
No,
So,
I think, 'cause I don't know who else wants to speak.
I believe the issue,
so are you rescinding your motion or you want to, what is your motion, Ms. Crockett?
Hey, what you say, Mr.
I believe that two people wanted to be recognized, and that was Mr. Russell Wood as the attorney for the two employees, former employees, and Mr. Andrew Bagley on behalf of the press. And Mr. Franklin asked you that you want to include Mr. Bagley in your motion.
Would you restate your motion, Ms. Crockett?
Mr. Andrew Bagley for the press and Mr. Russell Wood.
Anybody
Allowed to
else?
be Made a statement, not a.
Okay, so the motion is to allow Mr. Bagley, Mr. Wood to approach the council. And there's a second by Mr. Franklin. Any questions or comments about the motion? And again, I'm just going to issue my objection to the motion. Anything else for the record? If not, call the roll.
Davis,
Yes.
St. Columbia,
No.
Crockett,
Yes.
Franklin,
Yes.
Etherly,
No.
Ford.
Yes.
I have 4 yes and 2 no.
Motion passes. Mr. Wood, you want to go first? We want to give him time.
Thank you.
Ready? I want to thank you for the opportunity. I represent Officer Mills, Officer Givens, who were recently terminated. It's true that they received a letter. Just said you're at will employment and your services are no longer needed. Since that time, apparently an investigation, there's allegations of an investigation may have been open, but there's allegation of excessive force. And as far as my clients understand, the arrest of Ms. Warren is the only incident that would have caused a determination of excessive force to be concluded by the mayor against my two clients. I hope everybody here has seen the video because this is a situation of significant public interest. Because if there's excessive force on Ms. Mills, Officer Mills' body camera, then we have a real serious problem with the police being able to do their job in Helena, West Helena. I've been involved in over 200 federal cases. This is the most absurd allegation of excessive force by a resisting subject that I have ever been a part of. The lady was confrontational as soon as Officer Mills and Gibbons arrived on scene. As soon as they made entry into that funeral home or house of some sort, they advised her exactly what the warrant was for, a felony child abuse warrant. They attempted to place handcuffs on her and she resisted. She would not let them handcuff her. They didn't beat her. They didn't fire the taser at her. They didn't pepper spray her. They just kept asking her to comply and was finally able to get her hands behind her back and put the handcuffs on. They didn't throw her down after they got her handcuffed. They didn't hit her after they got her handcuffed. They simply walked her to the car. Miss Warren was confrontational and still resisting the entire time. Then she refused to get into the vehicle. They attempted to have her get into the vehicle on multiple occasions. She tried to kick at Officer Mills, and they were finally able to get her in the car. Now, if that's excessive force, the police officers in Helena-West Helena will not be able to arrest anybody ever again on a felony warrant or even a misdemeanor warrant or anything else. Officer Mills was a 7-year officer who was number 2 on the list only days after her termination to be promoted within the department. And by her termination, she never received that promotion. Officer Givens, probationary status still, he's the same situation. There's nothing on this video that shows any excessive force. Attorney Valley has went out of his way to say that the only evidence the 2 officers have regarding the reason for their termination was the letter. And the letter is intentionally vague. You're at will and you're terminated. This case, the decision that you guys are going to have to make tonight, it's going to send a clear message to your law enforcement here in Helena-West Helena, to the county and everywhere else. If you do your job, but you run afoul of the mayor or he has alternative reasons, you will be terminated under the at-will employment policy. It will be used as a sword to end your law enforcement career here at Helena. So we're going to ask you to overturn this termination. I don't know what the hiring, what the current status of the police department is here in Helena, but all across the state, departments are dying for employees, for police officers, certified officers, and otherwise. And it seems to be an issue up here to where we have these terminations that are at a higher rate than I see across the state with other officers that I represent. So we would ask you overturn this termination and put these 2 officers back to work. It costs the city a lot of money to send officers to Alita and get them certified. And so there are a variety of issues. As far as my understanding of the conflict of interest, I understand that Mr. Etherly no longer represents Ms. Mills. It was in a case that was of no factual consequence to this vote, that he would not have received any facts or knowledge that would be materially adverse or advantageous to Ms. Mills, representing a personal injury case, a car wreck. And unless Ms. Crockett was directly involved or even worked for the same agency, I see no reason that there would be a conflict of interest. Same with Mr. Franklin, if there was, it's not his child unless he was directly involved in that, getting that warrant for the charges. So we would ask that you overturn this termination, put these officers back to work. And they would also request back pay for the time that they have been terminated and not received paychecks for what I think is clearly an arbitrary decision to terminate these 2, not based on anything that I have seen in the video that is the subject that started all of this matter. So thank you.
You recognize Mr. Bagley? Mr. Bagley?
Thank you for the opportunity to address our objections. In our written objections, we reserve the right to add to them. I'm not going to rehash those that are already there, but the reason I asked for an opportunity to speak is the previous motion does not comply with the open meetings law. There are 4 specific purposes for which you can go back into executive session. That is hiring, that is firing, that is promotion, that is demotion. It is not simply discussion. You've got to state specifically, why are you going back there? You're going back there to hire or hire Miss Mills, hire Mr. Givens? Are you going back there to promote Miss Mills or Mr. Givens? Or are you going to take some other action? But the motion must be specific. And so I wanted to add that 4th objection to this executive session to the record. And again, I thank you for allowing me that opportunity. And before I leave the podium, I do want to say that I appreciate the city attorney dealing with the media in good faith. His job is very difficult, dealing with a client that has 2 heads. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bagley. So let me, before we move on, make one thing clear. Before we move on, let me make one thing clear that I think that I can say is part of the record. It should be said. And as I said earlier, Chief Mayfield is here, can be recognized as far as I'm concerned, should be if we pursue this further. Chief Mayfield recommended termination in both these 2 employees' cases. I had questions about those recommendations and ultimately agreed with his recommendation. That's what actually happened. There have been a lot of presumptions about other things, but that's what actually happened. Chief Mayfield, Lieutenant Smith came into my office a week ago today and recommended termination for both officers. That's in documentation. I'm not exactly sure what's been made available to the public as far as the documentation, but I just want to make it clearly known publicly that it is documented and that order. And so the letter of termination was not vague. It said, pretty significantly, I think, that your employment with the city is no longer in the interest of the city. That's a pretty important determination. And that's what happened. Those are the facts. Now, whatever else is being said about everything else, it's all conjecture. Those are the facts. The documentation and the record speaks for itself. Having said that, there isn't much more than that I can say because of investigations, both criminal and otherwise, and possible litigation. And I have sought legal advice from the municipal league as well. And so has Chief Mayfield, which he can explain if he chooses or if you choose at the proper time. Having said that, I'm going to open it back up to the council for your next act.
Prior to you all making any motions, I just want to state for the record as city attorney, again, I was not notified by anybody before the decision was made. Had I been done so, the reason why there was a release of the tape was the final administrative action. Typically in these situations, if there's going to be an investigation, I would advise that the investigation start and then the person be placed on administrative leave. That didn't happen. The employees were terminated. And so at that point, all the information became available and we're still awaiting an opinion relating to the release. None of the personnel files have been released at this point. All that's been released is the videotape. And I just wanted to make that clear for the record before you go forward. But to go into executive session, Mr. Bagley was right. That's why I asked Mr. Franklin what was his motion, because it's only consider hiring, firing, promotion, demotion. So the motion would have to be to consider the termination and potential rehiring of Ms. Mills and Mr. Givens, if that's what you all want to do.
So moving that order.
So your motion is to, for the council to go into executive session to consider the termination and potential rehiring of Mr. Givens and Ms. Mills.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, yeah.
I think there's a motion on the floor.
Hold
isn't
on,
there?
hold on 1 second. Mr. Franklin makes a motion. And you have appointed person privilege, or do you want? Because that's the only motion, that's the only motion that I can take at this point.
I have a question.
Well, hold on, just second the motion, Mr. St. Clement.
Is this being investigated? Is there an investigation going on at this moment involving this case?
Yes,
There is.
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor, and Mr. Franklin, your motion is to go into executive session to consider overturning the decision by Chief Mayfield and Mayor Smith to terminate the 2 employees, Ms. Mills and Mr. Gibbons. Is that correct?
He said terminate and potential rehire, is what he said.
Well, so to terminate and potential rehire?
Consider the termination and potential rehire.
Okay. And there was a second? No, sir. There was a second on that motion on the floor. And we're in period of discussion and question. I'll ask Mr. Valley if he wants to accept this question in open forum, or if you want to go.
I was gonna go.
Yeah, I'll let you go try and answer.
I'll make a comment while Mr. Valley.
Mr.
speaks with
Mr. Edley, you're recognized.
Typically, I would not respond to some of the commentary that's been made about potential conflicts in this matter, but since a formal objection has been made, I will respond to it prior to the executive session. And I think that it's very important to understand that as an attorney, I have 2 sets of rules that I follow when I sit at this table. One set would be the rules of professional conduct as it relates to my practice, me being a licensed attorney. The other would be the rules of ethics as it relates to me being on the city council. I would point to you that no one has cited a rule that requires me to recuse from this matter or speaks to an actual conflict that I may have. I do represent Ms. Mills in essentially a car wreck case that has concluded. And it did so in January. The case remains open because the order hasn't been filed yet, hasn't been signed and filed with the clerk. As it relates to the matter that the council may take up this evening, she has an attorney privately retained that is here to speak on her behalf and has spoken on her behalf. He is her lawyer, I am not. So as it relates to the rules of professional conduct, I have no conflict with Ms. Mills. As it relates to the rules of ethics, I have no monetary interest in what happens here tonight. And so I have no conflict to speak of. I believe that has been manufactured to lessen the number of people who can vote, but I can't speak for the other people at the council table. But for me personally, for the record, since a formal objection has been made, I have no conflict as it relates to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Edley.
If I may, we've been going round and round about discussions of what exactly is the city council doing. And Mr. Wood noticed his objection to me, and his objection particularly to Mr. Franklin's motion is, he believes the posture is that it should be considered reinstatement and rehire, because his position is that if you are reinstate, the firing wouldn't exist because she was asking for back pay. And I'm stating that for the record, and that's what he wanted this council to consider as you all go forward. Part of the issue that I must be candid about, Ms. Lee called me today and we had a lengthy conversation because they had a conversation with the Arkansas Press Associate Attorney, Mr. Toll. This is an issue of first impression because of the nature of what we're doing. What I mean, issue of first impression, there are no cases. We're going on our lawyer's experience and guidance relating to this narrow issue, and the press's objection relating to this is they're basically saying that as it's presented, is not ripe for an executive session because they're saying that this action is really a overturning of the mayor, which should be open. But I still believe it's employees matter. As I said, it's a balancing of the two, the employees' constitutional right versus the press's freedom of the press to know and the public's right and the substantial public interest that's in this case, because there's been much interest in this case and continue to be as we go forward. Mr. Franklin, having noted Mr. Wood's objection, do you so inclined to modify your motion to say that it is considered the overturning of the mayor and the reinstatement
So moving.
based on termination? I mean,
Yes.
it is termination and hiring is what we're dealing with. And I want to make that clear. Either way we address it, it's termination and hiring is what you all are dealing with.
Well, I've got a point of clarification. What exactly is the motion on the table? Because I've heard several different things now.
This motion, which I think,
Can we get it in?
I think we can leave the motion as it is.
For the-
Let me stop confusing.
For the record.
For the record, the motion was to consider the termination of and the rehiring. And the reason why I said termination and potential rehiring was to cover all the gamut, because here's the thing. We're in a dual situation where we may get sued by either side. Let me be candid with you. Press interest in suing us is that they believe that they should be here and hear everything discussed and go forward. The employee has an interest in privacy. The employee's main interest is that the employees feel like they've been wronged and they want to be reinstated with back pay. That's what it is. So I think if you say to consider the termination of it, like Mr. Franklin had, and the rehiring, you cover the whole gamut, you discuss the whole thing. I think you can leave it like it is, but we've noted Mr. Wood's objection related to it.
So the motion, just to be clear, is to consider the termination and potentially rehiring of the terminated employees in question, the two specifically, Ms. Mills and Ms. Reed. That's correct. And there was a second. Okay. I just want to make sure we all know what the motion is, especially our clerk. Other comments, questions about the motion?
So it's 7:28, that's how we get to it.
I will just say again, my objection to it. I think that we've had a lot of cases in the city just since I've been mayor, and probably even more since this council decided not to have hearings. This has all the makings of a hearing. In fact, we've even allowed the opposing council or the council opposing the city to ask questions, to give comments, to all the rest of that, which was done without any foreknowledge of the city and Mr. Valley's interest is the entire city, meaning the county, meaning the city council and the mayor. But now we're in a situation where the city council has to make a decision about an action by Chief Mayfield and the mayor. And so Mr. Valley's in a position where he can't represent us both if there's a conflict there, which means that the only advocate in the room legally is actually for the two people who were terminated. And there was no request made prior to our meeting for it to be on the agenda. I never saw any requests. And so we didn't make it available to anybody else. It has all the makings of a one-sided hearing. I would object to it. Also, this is the police department. This is not other departments in the city. We're talking about people with guns and badges and the force of law. And if the chief of police, not just the mayor, but the chief of police, who is the ultimate supervisor over the police officers, cannot have their decisions sustained like this, you're going to have the potential of an officer with a gun and a badge and the force of law on the streets with nobody to answer to except the city council. And maybe not even them, because I'm not sure the city council can fire or hire. According to the law, you can't. All you can do, and depending on who you listen to, is overturn decisions of hiring and firing. So who's going to hire and fire? What's going to happen in the case overturning a decision by Chief Mayfield that I support in the case of law enforcement. It's a very serious matter. And I do object to going into executive session because Chief Mayfield and I will tell you, as soon as we get in there, there is nothing specific about this case that we're allowed to answer. And we have been advised by attorneys that that is the case. You will not know any more from us than you already know right now. So there is no reason to go into executive session because all you can do is vote, and we've got to announce the results of that anyway publicly after we come out of executive session. The only thing we could do in executive session is talk at other members of the council, speak to and ask questions and try to get information, which Chief Mayfield and I are prohibited from providing. So they're basically just going to be discussions, arguments, advocacy, and a vote, all of which should be taking place in the public eye. And so having made that comment, I'll ask for other comments or questions before we take a vote.
I will say this for the record. I was not included in those discussions. I don't know who those attorneys are, but there's one city attorney for the city of Helena-West, that's me. And as relates to it, I should have been made privy to any decision or any potential investigation prior to done. And once the employee is fired, that's the final administrative action. If I'd have been called beforehand by these attorneys that are allegedly telling you not to speak, I'm not saying that you're saying it falsely. I'm just saying that the people who are saying not to speak, then the issue was, I would have said clearly that place the people on administrative leave while the pendency investigation, et cetera. But once the final administrative act, we can get no more final determination. Once that happens, the freedom of information kicks in and they have a right to know, the public has a right to know, compelling public interest takes over. And so I had a duty to act and release the tape and et cetera. And Mr. League agrees with that because they called me today and we're just trying, as I said, the yolk is out of the egg and we're trying to deal with it and it's been dropped in my lap. I would appreciate in the future from the police chief, I told him private, told the mayor, so I would appreciate if you all would keep me in the loop, then we wouldn't be in this position.
Mr. Attorney,
Yes.
what if we went into executive section and we have this case under investigation, would we be overruling the investigation itself and in violation of anything that is criminally found by us overriding the investigation? And that's my, because the mayor, and I think you also agreed that it is under investigation.
I don't agree with that. The mayor said that. Now, the thing I want to say to you is this. Here's one thing, the position I placed in the city attorney, and this is why it's important for the department heads to talk to the city attorney and for the mayor to talk to the city attorney. If they had told me beforehand, I would have talked to them about that and they could have kept me privy to that. Now you have some person who's not the city attorney advised the mayor not to talk, advisement, and we're in this practical situation where the mayor is now saying, I can't have a fair hearing. Well, if the person would have talked to me instead of usurping the city attorney's office, then we wouldn't be in this position. Now, it's not my fault that the city is in this position. I was not advised by the chief, by the mayor, anyone in the police department, any of that before determination, in which I should be beforehand. And so what I'm saying is this, as city attorney, when I received the FOI from the Helena World, I didn't have a document of the open investigation from any agency. So I cannot use the open investigation language to thwart the Freedom of Information Act, because we get sued for that, because I would be telling a falsehood because I didn't have a letter saying the state police is taking it over. I didn't have a letter saying the FBI is taking it over. I didn't have anything to say we have an open investigation. What I had was an FOI request and 2 employees that have been terminated. And that is what I had. And then I did talk to Mr. Murray. Mr. Murray had a long conversation with me Friday, the prosecuting attorney, Todd Murray. And I shared to him when he called me Friday. I talked to him because he was upset that this video was released. I talked to him and said, I'm the city attorney. And when the request was made of me, I didn't have anything about investigation. And so when it's made of the city, I have to go through and look through and investigate it and release what I have in accordance to the law. So the simple answer for everybody that's bemoaning this process, talk to the city attorney. That's why I'm here.
Well, let me point of personal privilege. Mr. Valley, I did email you before you released the video that I could not address the council about the specifics of this termination because it was under criminal investigation. And that email is still in your email. It's still in my email. And it was before that. So I couldn't tell you anything more than that because I am not privy to the details of it because I shouldn't be. I'm a political figure, but it does prevent me from it prevents me from discussing it, and it also prevents Chief Mayfield, and I can't remember if I mentioned him in the email or not, but you found out about it within an hour or two, I think, something like that, of when I found out. So to say that I did not inform you is not accurate. I did inform you relatively soon after I found out, and I told you all that I could tell you, which is that I can't comment because it's pending criminal investigation. And I was advised by the Arkansas Municipal League, among other lawyers, that it would not be wise because of that those investigations and others. And so I want to clarify, nobody intentionally left you out of anything. I did, in fact, email you. And one reason I emailed you is because I frequently get requests for documentation to prove it whenever I just say I did something. And so I'm trying to email better so that it can be documented, and that can be.
Let me be clear. The termination decision and all of that, none of y'all talked to me about that. And I would advise you before the ever release that we should have gone through the administrative leave process. And that's what I'm talking about. None of that had happened. And that is what I'm saying. It's one of those things, if we replace them on administrative leave with or without pay, then we wouldn't even be having this discussion. But there's also a table.
I can let Mr. Mayfield answer this, but I'm not going to make him. But it's my understanding that we let you know pretty quickly about that.
Mr. Mayor, I got an email from Helena-West that they had been terminated when everybody else got it.
Well, how soon was that?
That was last week. But there was no investigation. You didn't notify any of us in that email that they terminated. You didn't talk to me beforehand. And that's what I'm saying. You need advice before you take the action. That's why we're in the action.
So you're saying the city attorney should be in the approval process for hiring and firing?
What I'm saying to you is,
I've never read that anywhere.
What I'm saying to you, before you make a decision that potentially puts the city in peril for litigation, you should talk to the city attorney. That's what I'm saying. And firing decisions do that. Mr. Wood back there sued us many times.
What I did do is email you that I could not speak to the specifics of this. Because, no, I'm clarifying the record, Ms. Crockett, because I wasn't given the right to counsel or anything else tonight. Nobody said we were going to have a hearing, which is what this amounts to. I'm going to tell you in front of the public that it's almost within an hour of me finding out about it. Everything I knew, which wasn't a lot, was emailed, and that's why I couldn't, that's one of the reasons I couldn't specify more tonight. And again, it is tonight. So I want to make that very clear. And this is Chief Mayfield's recommendation to terminate these two individuals. I supported it after talking to them about it, and we acted on it. And that is the procedure and the policy that we follow in the city of Helena-West Helena, and that's what we did follow. And I haven't said that. I think I don't know if Mr. St. Columbia or Mr. Franklin has anything else they want to say. At one time, they wanted to be recognized, I think.
The only thing I'm concerned about, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, Mr. Mayor, is that since there is an investigation going on, and then we're going into executive section for the purpose of hiring these people back, I think that'd be messing up the investigation. I think we'd be getting involved in the decision that has been made to an investigation going on. I think we're treading on thin ice there.
Mr. Franklin.
I just want to say.
That's my opinion.
I just want to say this. Mr. Valley said that you should have had him in on the hiring and firing. I said this, and I'm gonna say this. When Mr. Valley should have, and I'm not getting into day-to-day operation, but only time you take Mr. Valley's advice, I know we out of the month that we celebrate, but Mr. Valley should have been in on there, because guess what? When you first became mayor, we had a lot of litigation about people were fined about overtime. So the people elected a city attorney. and I respect the city attorney, and I would like to see you do the same thing. Black History Month is over with, but you still respect the city attorney, although the month is over with.
Mr. Franklin, I think the city attorney deserves a lot of respect. So
You don't
does,
give it to
but
him.
so does the mayor, Mr. Franklin.
I respect
And
you.
that's my only point is if it's going to be characterized that I didn't inform the city attorney about a criminal, that's just not true. He may not have seen the email, and that's fair, but it's not the same thing as saying I did not send it. And the only other thing I would, he said that I did not let him know. Ms. Crockett, he said, Mr. Crockett, he said many things. That was one of them. Any other comments or questions, sir? Okay, call the roll.
Davis. St. Columbia,
No.
Crockett,
Yeah.
Franklin,
Yes.
Etherly,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
5 yes and 1 no.
Let us go
At
back.
this point, we can discuss the Zoom. The Zoom is gonna go blank, the camera's gonna be turned off. Audio, video is gonna be muted at this point, and everyone has to leave the room except for the mayor, the city council, the chief of police, the 2 employees, and the media supervisor for the employee. Everyone else has to leave. The motion is second to go back into regular session.
Ms. Foremost, we've already done this privately, but we're doing it again publicly for the record. Ms. Foremost, that we go back into regular session. Ms. Crockett seconds the motion. Any questions or comments about the motion? If not, call roll.
Davis. Going back into regular session. St. Columbia, absent. Crockett,
Yes.
Franklin,
Yes.
Etherly,
Yes.
Ford, 5 yes, 1 absent.
Motion passes. So now we are officially back in session as a city council. Mr. Valley, you want to pick it up from there?
Yes, before you all do a vote and express what you all have done, I went back and checked my email based on what the mayor said earlier. On the 8th, I received an email from Ms. Helen Halbert with the 2 letters. And on the 10th, I received an email from Ms. Sandy Ramsey, and the mayor responded. His specific language to me was, I'm not liberty to discuss Mills' issue, even in executive session at this time. If the city attorney would like to advise me otherwise, I will recommend his counsel. I will welcome his counsel. And I responded to that email detailing many of the things I said today. There was nothing in that email about there being a ongoing investigation. That's the email I received on the 10th, and that was the email I responded to. And that's the only one I've seen from the mayor on the issue. Now, as it relates to the actions relating to what's going on, what does the council say based on what has happened in executive session?
Make a motion to bring the 2 employees back on administrative leave, which would include pay pending the investigation of any and all outside agencies, and that is the conclusion of any investigation by any and all outside agencies.
Mr. Etherly makes a motion that we want to restate that one more time. Make sure we got it.
I move that we reinstate the employees, Gibbons and Mills, on administrative leave that would be with pay pending the completion of any investigations by outside agencies
Does your motion have an effective date?
immediately. Well, wait a minute. Let's make it retroactive to the date that they were terminated. So the administrative leave will begin on the date that they were terminated.
I received a letter on the 8th of March,
I don't know what that date is.
but just for the record, you're saying back to the date of the termination?
Yes, retroactive to the date of termination. So they will be on administrative leave from the date they were terminated.
Can you explain administrative leave?
As soon as they finish the motion.
Well, actually, Mr. Valley, if you could, I'm going to ask you to restate it in full.
Okay.
Beginning to end. So there's
Motion-
no question at home or.
Mr. Evans' motion is to bring back the 2 employees, Ms. Mills and Mr. Gibbons, from the time of their termination with effective date and for them to be on administrative leave pending the outcome of any and all ongoing investigations. Is that correct, Mr. Ethier?
That's correct. And that's by outside agencies.
And that's
not-
with pays, right?
That's with pay, that's by outside agencies.
Well, you said, at first you said any and all. So which is
Outside, I say any and all outside agencies,
any and all?
any and all outside agencies. So let
So
me,
no local investigation by
No,
internally.
well, the internal investigation has been completed. The Helena-West
Have you completed it?
I'm
Have
sorry,
you completed yours, of your determination of what happened?
I'm not an investigator, but we did hear from some people in the department. The internal investigation has been completed. So this is administratively pending outside agencies, which means anybody who is not the Helena-West Helena Police Department.
Okay, we'll try it one more time. It's important to get it from Ms. Ramsey and on the record,
Ms. Ramsey, did you-
exactly like it should read in the minutes. And it's likely to be litigated anyway, so it needs to be precise and unquestionable.
effective the date of their termination. So in lieu of termination, what Ms. Ether's motion would be, place them on administrative leave with pay from that moment forward until the conclusion of any outside agency doing completing an investigation.
Can we have the clerk read that back so that we're all on the same page as to what her minutes are going to reflect?
Okay, it says to reinstate the two employees, Mills and Givens, from the time of termination for them to be on paid administrative leave until completion of any and all investigations by outside agencies.
That's it.
And the date of their termination was March the 8th, according to the city attorney.
That's it. That's the motion.
Okay. Any questions? Well, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Crockett seconds the motion. Any questions or comments about the motion? I'll only say one thing before you vote on this. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but it came out that the actual recommendation by the chief has not been requested, nor has it been reviewed by the city council. The documentation, which is the reason the actual termination recommendation by Chief Mayfield has not even been read. And I believe it's a dangerous precedent.
Let me pause.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
You cannot discuss what happened in executive session.
Mayor, you can't do
You can't
that.
discuss what happened in executive session.
I can tell you that the material facts are the council is overturning a decision that they don't have
Oh, my
documentation.
God.
Is that not true?
Man, I wasn't in executive session. I don't know what y'all
But you
discussed.
said it was because you didn't have ignorance.
Well, no, what I said was Mr.
Y'all
Valley.
ain't supposed to be discussing
Mr.
anything.
Valley has, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Valley controls who can get that and who can't. If nobody from the
But
council,
that shouldn't
if
be
no
a
one-
discussion, because we discussed that in executive session. That is not for the public.
Well, I-
All the public needs to know is our decision.
okay, well, that question came up.
No, it shouldn't be,
It just came up.
that's
Ms.
why you were
Crockett.
in executive session, Mayor.
It just came up
You
about
need to
Mr.
learn, you
Valley.
need to learn the law, because you read
Let me
it out
call.
of the law.
I'm trying to clarify that before you vote, the council does not have a copy of the actual
Oh, my God, you still don't-
recommendation.
you still don't-
Pause.
Determination by Chief Mayfield.
Man, you cannot discuss that because that was executive session issue.
Well, it's an issue right now. We're out of executive session.
But it's not, it's.
We talked about it in
We talked about
executive
executive
session. We are
session.
not talking
Executive
about
sessions
it
are
here.
confidential as to what you talked about. Now.
So I should not tell the public that you don't have the written
Man,
recommendation in front of you.
You don't tell them anyway you can, ain't
I'm asking, once you
you? No,
answer,
you don't, he's telling you to be quiet.
why don't you answer the question? I'm not supposed to tell the public.
Man.
Oh, my God.
Well, you don't
Oh,
have
my
the
God.
recommendation.
Oh, my God. Oh, my
Yes or
God.
no?
Man,
Oh, my God.
arbitrarily. Stop, Mr. Franklin, you all still hadn't voted.
My legs are just hurt.
The thing about it, Mayor, what you are doing is you can't have your way. So now you're trying,
Mr. Valley.
Mayor, listen, I'm talking, don't interrupt me. Do not
Point of personal privilege.
You
Mr.
asked me a
White.
question. You don't have a point of
I
privilege.
asked
You asked me a question and I will answer it.
Okay, well, answer the
I
question
directed you
without
several times.
making personal attacks on me.
I'm not making personal attacks on you. I've directed you several times about this, that what you discussed in executive session is an executive session. That's why you went in. That's why the press objected to it. There's a motion on the floor and you made your statements beforehand. Mr. Wood made his statements, Mr. Bagley made his statements, and the council is now in a position to vote, and they should vote on that. And whatever happened in the executive session is what occurred. It is private. And so I'm not going to entertain your question.
So it's your position, we can't communicate or discuss the motion in front of the public?
No, I'm not, it's not the motion. Your
It's the
motion,
motion on the table.
you cannot discuss the
Consideration
merits
is
of what
whether
you
to
discussed.
overturn
You
a
cannot discuss the
decision
merits of
made.
what was discussed within the executive session, man.
And it was seconded, and that's for, and we're having
You
comment,
cannot discuss
conversation,
the
and
merits of
questions.
what was discussed in the executive session. That's the purpose of the executive session.
And all I said was, it's,
Oh, you gonna say,
It's
it?
not
you
in front
gonna, you gonna make sure the
the
president
actual
on that?
action that you're overturning is not in front of you.
Oh, my
So
God.
I'm not sure why that should, and I objected to the executive session,
Oh, my
and I still
God.
object to it. But the fact is, you don't have the written determination and the recommendation from Chief Mayfield. So having said that, if there are no other questions or comments, call roll.
Soon, baby.
Speaking objections.
Columbia is absent. Franklin,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Davis, Ford,
Yes.
Etherly.
Yes.
I have 4 yeses, 1 abstention, and 1 absent.
Okay, motion passes. I'm gonna, the chief, assistant chief, fire chiefs have waited patiently. I'm going to entertain their request for the count. I know it's late, but it's late for them also. If you want to maintain a quorum to discuss the fire truck issue, I'm open
I'm
to
gonna
it.
do just like you do.
It's up to the council.
You know,
Okay, we're gonna waste. Okay, so I gather we don't want to stay for the fire truck discussion, so I haven't seen the council leave the room. There's no quorum. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.